Hey everyone, thanks for coming. We're just going to give folks just a minute or two to jump in before we get started today. We do appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us. But yeah, we'll give us a minute or two and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we can get started. I'm sure folks will be entering this little preamble too. So I appreciate everyone attending today for this Team Science Skills Series session put on by the Georgia CTSA. Just as a heads up, we have one future workshop for the rest of the semester. That'll be on December 6th presented by Shannon Marlowe from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and she'll be presenting on team communication. But that's not today. Today, we actually, sorry, I do this every time too. I've done it enough that I shouldn't be forget this slide exists. But yeah, following the session, please fill out the evaluation form. We use your feedback all the time in constructing these efforts. It'll ask you how well it went, and it'll ask you also whether or not you want to sign up for a consultation session with one of our experts. And that expert today is Dr. Bessie Rowland. She will be presenting on collaboration planning, and I'm sure she will tell you more about herself a little bit during her intro. But she designs, develops, and evaluates and disseminates team science training and interventions, enabling researchers to focus more on science and less on managing the collaboration challenges. She leads a team science core as well, delivering impactful seminars, workshops, one of which you are presently here for, and team coaching to support NIH funded teams and research staff, complete expert in all things team science. And she was here today to talk about collaboration planning. So I will hand it over to you, Betsy.
Thank you so much. All right, give me 1 second to get my slides up. All right, does that look good?
Looks
All
great.
right. Okay, thanks. So, hello everyone. My name is Betsy Rolland, and I am the Translational Science Strategist at the University of Michigan CTSA, which is called MISHAR, as well as the founder of the Team Science Lab and Otter Coaching. And as Chris mentioned, I have been engaged in the study and practice of team science for nearly 15 years as a Science of Team Science researcher and the PI of multiple NIH-funded coordinating centers, as well as a recently funded R01 focused on the information needs of translational teams. And I am deeply committed to developing these tools and resources for scientists and for science facilitators like project managers and research development professionals that lead to more high impact science. And I'm also really focused on ensuring that these tools and resources are as usable and practical as possible. So today I'm going to give you an overview of the collaboration planning intervention, what it is and how it can be used. But first, we're going to start with some background on team science and some of the best practices we know can help teams collaborate more efficiently and effectively. So I want to open with this thought. We know that science teams rarely fail because of the science. They fail or falter because of the organizational choices that leaders make and the culture that leaders build. It's not that your team can't do the assays or the biostats are too hard. It's that few of us are trained in optimizing how our teams work together or even really thinking much about how we're working together at all. And collaboration planning can help a team work through those questions in a structured, evidence-based way that helps the team coalesce around a vision for collaboration. There are many reasons why scientists might collaborate, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about these over the course of this Team Science Skills series. They might need access to data, tools, or expertise that they don't have readily available. They might need to bring in alternative viewpoints to make sure that they're answering their complex question in the best way. It might be that the problem is too big for them to solve on their own, or that the problem requires more time or effort than one team can give. We're all human, we can only work so much. Or they might have complementary aims where they look at their project as something that, the two projects working together would be able to answer a more interesting, complex question. So I get asked this question often: what is team science, and am I doing team science? And team science is a combination of cross-disciplinary knowledge generating research and collaboration, or working together with significant contributions from team members. I think it's equally important to be clear about what is not team science. In general, we don't consider multidisciplinary healthcare teams to be team science because they're generally not trying to generate new knowledge. If they're part of a research project, then of course, that would count as being part of the team. Working together within one lab is generally not considered team science because you don't have some of the hierarchy challenges that you might have when working in distributed teams. Working together within one discipline is generally not considered team science because you don't have the challenges of that cross-disciplinarity. But I think this is actually changing a little bit as disciplines become more specific and investigators become more specialized in their knowledge. So two different kinds of, say, chemists working together might have very different sort of approaches to their work. And finally, teamwork that isn't conducting scientific inquiry. So thinking about like the HR team or the finance team. So in a 2020 JCTS paper, I led a team that identified 6 behaviors and practices that we want to encourage collaborative science teams to weave into their approach to collaboration. And this particular paper focused on how these behaviors can increase rigor and reproducibility of research, but they're all evidence-informed approaches to effective teamwork and areas that you can focus on in working to improve how your teams function. And these are the behaviors and practices that we want to encourage with collaboration planning. So I'm going to go into these in a bit of detail, so bear with me here. And if you would like to learn more about these best practices, there's a link there to the Team Science Lab Substack page that I have. First up is developing a shared mission, vision, and goals. Research has repeatedly shown that being on the same page around what you're trying to achieve has tremendous benefits. But I have seen in my coaching and work that alignment is often illusory. Teams may think that they agree on the direction that the project is going, what is expected of them, what they can expect of others, and how the team will work together. But that is frequently not true. And in fact, this was one of the key findings of my dissertation work, which was really great for writing a dissertation, but maybe less great for the teams that were struggling. Fortunately, this is one of the most accessible best practices to develop because it really can be accomplished with conversations and regular brief reflections like these listed here. You can ask the people on your team, what is the overarching problem we're trying to solve? How will the world be different if we solve this problem? Who will be impacted by solving it? And what intangible terms would success look like if we were to solve this problem? So these are pretty straightforward questions. And you might be surprised if you start asking your team members these questions, if you're all on the same page or not. And then once you've had these conversations, as you go through the work, you can reflect, what progress have we made toward our goals? And are we still in alignment around what we want to accomplish with this project? Next up, facilitate interdisciplinary conversations on approaches, methods, and results. A key benefit of team science is stepping outside of our comfort zones and thinking about our own research differently. It's so easy to keep using the methods and approaches we learned in our training. If it works, why change it? But if you want to shift from business as usual incremental research to leading high impact breakthrough science teams that affect real change in the world, doing things the same way you've always done them isn't enough. We know that innovation often flows from taking interesting ideas in one field and applying them in new ways in another. And that requires having cross-disciplinary conversations. Having these deliberate conversations about how we do our science and why we do it this way has 3 important benefits. First, done well, these conversations start to build trust and a sense of community when people are learning together in a psychologically safe environment. Because of that, it's really important that the discussions are fun and playful, not scary or mean-spirited. Second, these conversations force us to take something that can become rote and automatic and take a step back and ask ourselves, why exactly are we doing it this way? Is this the best way, or is there a better way out there? Is my way the right way, or does someone else on the team have an idea that could make our work even more innovative and exciting? Methods can become so entrenched in a discipline that they start to lose their impact. Third, in listening to our collaborators describe their methods, we might discover new ways of thinking about our own work. We might discover tools or methods that, once adapted to our context, change our approach or even our field. Cross-disciplinary conversations don't have to be these huge, complex undertakings. All you really need is some curiosity, some ground rules, and a little structure. It's really important for the project leadership to model this behavior, asking questions, giving team members time to share their thoughts, and emphasizing the value of all team members' contributions. A couple of activities that you could engage in with that have sort of a minimal overhead might include thinking together about why each discipline is included in your project plan. Why did you bring those into this team science project? Or asking key personnel and subteams to share what they plan to do, how they'll do it, and why they've chosen this approach. Again, this needs to be done in an open and curious, not hostile and accusing way. It helps to remember that cross-disciplinary understanding isn't a one-and-done conversation. It really needs to be an ongoing discussion throughout the life of the project. And also, please remember that there's no shame in bringing in someone from outside the team to facilitate these conversations, like an external facilitator or a research development person with this expertise. In fact, if the team leader isn't comfortable leading these conversations, it's probably going to be more productive to bring in an external person. Third, create a culture of trust, accountability, openness, inclusivity, and constant learning. Why? Because such a culture, which we might call psychological safety or close enough for today's conversation, is a key predictor of team success. And you can learn more about psych safety by visiting the work of Dr. Amy Edmondson of the Harvard Business School. Psychological safety is especially critical for science teams who are operating in these complex, changing environments every single day. Science teams really rely on team members to share new, innovative, potentially disruptive ideas in order to make progress. And there are a number of characteristics of science teams that make a culture of psychological safety really especially important. First, science teams often have these transient memberships. People cycle on and off the team, people graduate, right? They go on to their next position. And that can really impact how people relate to and trust one another. Second, academic research is inherently hierarchical, which creates these power dynamics among team members that can be really hard to navigate without a culture that deliberately cultivates psychological safety. Third, academia itself gives this outsized power to mentors to impact how their trainees' careers develop through the allocation of resources, as well as the over-reliance on letters of recommendation and the power of professional networks. Mentors who choose to wield power instead of creating an environment of psychological safety will really be unable to fully harness that creativity and innovation of their mentees, while also most likely actively doing harm. Fourth, science teams are knowledge-producing groups that need to be able to share ideas to generate their best science, right? That's how we come up with these creative new ways to look at the world. And if team members do not feel safe speaking up and sharing their new ideas, no matter how off the wall they might sound, you and your team will not be as creative as you could be. So a few simple tips from Dr. Edmondson's Leaders Toolkit. Emphasizing purpose. Do your team members really understand why you're doing the work and that you're all doing together and how their work fits into that overarching purpose? Do they understand that overarching vision of your team and the impact that you want to achieve with your work? Understanding that purpose that is motivating their work can help team members overcome those hurdles of sharing their ideas and speaking up, even if they're nervous. Second is proactive inquiry. How often do you ask your teams these powerful open-ended questions as opposed to just simply telling them what to do? Do you understand your team members' goals and their reasons for participating in your team, making sure that those goals are aligned from their personal goals through your team goals, through your department goals, etc.? And have you asked them how your team can improve its culture and climate to make it more supportive for them to do their work? And third is destigmatizing failure. How do you respond when someone tells you they've made a mistake or something didn't work as planned? Do you celebrate the learning or punish the failure? And when failures are celebrated and considered just part of doing science, as they should be, team members are more likely to share what they learned than to cover up their mistakes. Next up is building strong research support systems, a category which includes project management, information management, financial management, and people management. And these are all absolutely critical for conducting science effectively and efficiently, but few of us received any training in these areas during our PhD programs or even when beginning to build our research programs. Often new investigators are given a huge chunk of money and go off and run a research lab with absolutely no idea how to start. We're just expected to develop and implement these systems in support of our research using existing university-provided tools that are rarely tailored to the complexities of scientific work. Making that concept of building strong research support systems even more challenging is that, full transparency, not a lot of research has been done in this area in the pursuit of developing best practices that researchers can use. What works in a typical office setting might not work in a distributed research team in the university setting, where many team members are working on multiple projects, and they might be expected to follow different processes for each one. I do a lot of work with coordinating centers, and each one creates its own portal system or document management system. And I need to have a different username, a different password for every single one. And it's just not a great way to work. And here I've shared a couple of recent papers from my work on information management, and which I'll return to in the next slide. So how can you get started in the task of building these strong research support systems? First is to budget for system development work. I cannot stress enough how important it is to allocate resources to engaging in system development. If you, for example, have a startup package, this is a great way to use those funds because these strong research support systems will pay huge dividends in research productivity later on. I always encourage everyone I work with to budget for project management support. Even if on paper it makes you look like you're doing less science, you're actually going to get more done if you are not responsible for all of the project management. Next, simple is best, especially when you are just getting started with system development. Start as simply as you can. There's no need to create an elaborate project management system, for example, if you're working on like a small pilot study with one other person. Even as your team and projects grow in size and scope, these simple systems that require minimal upkeep and user training are always going to give you the best return on investment. Next, take the time to do a very simple scope of work for each system. What do you need this system to do? What are the pain points you're experiencing in your research, like finding the right version of the protocol, or you can't find your meeting minutes or decision records? What platforms are available to you for free or very low cost? And it's important that this scope really includes what everyone on their team needs to do their jobs. And some universities have IT or strategic planning experts who might be able to help with this step. There is no perfect platform for any of this stuff. I get that asked all the time, like, how should I do this? What tools should I use? And the right platform for your team is the one that requires the least amount of upkeep, is easy for people to use, and meets your scope of work. That might be Google Docs or something more advanced like SharePoint. It really depends on what you're trying to do. But a simple system that everyone understands and is willing to use in the way you want them to will always beat out a more complex system that is confusing and will spur workarounds and people sort of cheating on what they're supposed to do. Next, conduct regular trainings in your systems and send your staff and trainees to trainings in the theories behind them. So when you spend that time to train your staff and your trainees in using the systems, they're more likely to use them and use them correctly if they understand what the processes are and what your expectations are. Teams change and evolve over time, so conducting those regular trainings helps you make sure that the new members are using the systems properly. And these trainings might surface challenges or needed improvements that you hadn't previously noticed and can be addressed. Some flexibility will enhance your system. We each come to our teamwork with our individual systems in place that work, maybe or maybe not, for us, but will probably conflict with how others on our team work. Creating processes within your systems that allow a little flexibility for how your team members' brains work can help your system be more successful. And finally, trust but verify. Once you have everyone trained on the system, check to make sure that they are actually using it and using it the way that you want them to. Repeat the training sessions every time someone new joins the team. I have seen so many projects go astray when team members decide to secretly use their own systems rather than the ones that are agreed to by the team. And when that happens, you're going to end up losing information and even losing data, and not to mention being super frustrated. I'd like to take a brief pause and tell you about the NLM-funded R01 that I'm leading, which is focused on understanding the tools and strategies that teams use in their information behaviors. So we've just started recruiting teams, and we would love to talk to you if you're interested. We're looking for teams that are working in translational research, broadly defined, at any stage of the translational continuum, working on a specific funded project, which could be internal or external funding, pilot funding, or large grants, and have at least 4 team members, including the PI, who are willing to participate. As you can imagine, recruiting science teams to participate in scientific research is not easy, so I appreciate you sharing this broadly with any teams that you think might be interested. So next up is building accessible, transparent data management systems. When researchers from different fields come together, ideas about what constitutes rigorous scientific data can be wildly different. Any qualitative researcher can tell you how difficult it can be to convince certain scientists that qualitative data counts as real data. Further, one person's metadata can serve as another person's data. For example, consider a team of oceanographers who are collecting sea life at certain spots in the ocean to track population levels. In addition to collecting the creatures themselves, they might collect metadata like location, water temperature, currents, wind speed, etc. Another research team might be more interested in the way that water temperature varies across time, making that first team's metadata their primary data. And when we talk about data systems that are accessible, we want to think about how collaborators from other institutions or even community partners might be able to access the data where warranted. And we know from our research that sharing data across departments within one institution even can be challenging. Transparency is focused on thinking about who does and doesn't have access to the data for whatever scientific or organizational reasons, and being transparent about those decisions. That transparency leads to greater trust. And I just want to be clear that I'm not saying that everybody on every team should have access to all of the data, but just that you need to think carefully about how and why you're making those decisions, and making those decisions clear to others. Because data are the absolute lifeblood of scientific research, whatever those data might look like, being completely clear about the team's approach to data design, collection, analyses, interpretation, and publication is really important to the team's scientific and organizational success. So there's just a few questions that you can ask of your team. What kinds of conversations do we want to have around our processes for these activities? Who needs to be part of those conversations? What constitutes data in each of our fields as it pertains to this project? Are we all approaching data collection, analysis, and interpretation in ways that align with one another? How do our different types of data complement or conflict with one another? And who gets to decide if and when we will share the data with outside collaborators? And finally, fostering strong functional leadership. When we talk about functional leadership, we're thinking about different members of the team stepping up and taking on leadership when their skill set and the project tasks are best aligned. Leadership in team science is really pretty poorly defined, in my opinion, in part because it can be really difficult to define the boundaries of the team being led. Is the leader of the team the PI? What if there are multiple PIs distributed across multiple organizations? Or maybe there's a relatively inexperienced PI who's being mentored as the leader by more senior researchers. Then who gets treated as the leader of that team? And one key point to remember here is that leadership and management are not the same thing, but that leadership of your team requires those management structures in place in order to succeed. A few more notes about leadership of teams include that good leadership inspires and motivates a team toward a common purpose. It promotes team innovation and promotes satisfaction, role clarity, and productivity. Leadership is often presented as though it's this innate characteristic, like some people are leaders and others are not. Maybe, thinking back to your elementary school report card, right, where you got a score on being a leader or not, as though it was just one kind of thing. In reality, leadership is simply this set of behaviors, strategies, and practices that anyone can choose to build. And if you want to improve your leadership skills, here are a few places to start. First, spend a little time reflecting on what kind of leader you want to be. We've all experienced good and bad leaders, and I just encourage you to think about which of these leadership behaviors and practices you have seen that you would like to emulate or you very much want to avoid. It's also helpful to consider your particular team and identify one or two leadership practices that you believe will facilitate success. Then just try them out for a couple of months and see what works for you and for your team. In the end, a leadership philosophy that is truly authentic to your values and the leader you want to be will be much more effective than simply reading a book and trying to emulate someone else's approach. So now that we've gone through the strategies and practices we want to encourage, let's dive into collaboration planning itself. So in my role as the director of the Team Science Core at the University of Wisconsin-Madison CTSA and now at MSHAR, I focus on building infrastructure to facilitate collaborative science. One of the tools I developed is called collaboration planning. It is really helpful in servicing some of those cultural assumptions we all bring to team science and creating the conditions for success for the teams that participate in it. So just a little background on collaboration planning and how we developed it. The problem we were trying to solve at UW-Madison, at UW-ICTR, was how could we help our teams launch more effectively and efficiently? And we're really focused on the ICTR pilot grants. I'm sure you've all been part of teams that have struggled to move beyond, hey, we have this great idea, so let's do it. So I set out to develop an intervention that met the following criteria. It had to be accessible, meaning that it didn't require substantial pre-existing knowledge in team science in order to be effective. So we've designed an intervention that does not require deep knowledge of the principles of team science. It had to be active in that it engages individuals and teams as participants in their own learning, teaching skills as opposed to this passive didactic delivery of information. I wanted it to be actionable so that it provides a roadmap for taking what the team has learned and using it to address those strengths and weaknesses of the team with priorities for improvement. I also wanted to be really sure that the intervention I was asking teams to spend valuable time on had some evidence of effectiveness and that it didn't require a huge time investment from the teams. In short, I wanted the team to walk away with a deeper knowledge of how their team processes impact their scientific work, the skills to design, assess, and when needed, correct their team processes based on the science of team science evidence base. And most importantly, the attitude that team processes are something that they can and should impact. I really wanted to move beyond team science courses or workshops where individuals learned about the science of team science and into finding ways to actually change the way that the teams worked. So I turned to collaboration planning, which is a framework that has been part of the science of team science field for a while, based on work by Doctors Amanda Vogel and Kara Hall of the National Cancer Institute and Kevin Croston of the National Science Foundation. I quickly saw that we would need to operationalize that original framework so that it was using language that would make sense to the teams as opposed to the sort of science of team science language. After several rounds of development and testing with the teams at UW, I ended up with this 90-minute structured facilitated session that walks the team through discussion of its approach to collaborative work. And the outcome of a session is a written collaboration plan that lays out the team's strategy for working together. In the collaboration planning session, we cover 7 key topics that impact a team's collaborative work. So we focus on the team vision. What is the overarching goal of this team and what does success look like? People, roles, and responsibilities. Who is on the team and how will they contribute? Team processes and functioning. How will you make decisions and resolve disputes? Team culture. What are your team's norms and expectations? And this is one of the most challenging for the teams to dive into, but it really helps to set those expectations because you can't hold people accountable for meeting your expectations if those expectations aren't clear. Team outputs, things like papers, data sets, presentations, etc. What do we anticipate from this project and how will authorship, credit, and attribution work? Project management and infrastructure. How will you manage your tasks, information, and data? And implementation and maintenance. How will your team implement your plan? So who should do collaboration planning? Of course, this is a trick question because I think all teams can benefit from thinking more about their team processes. Collaboration planning is especially useful for establishing those shared goals and mutual understanding in a way that lays the groundwork for systems of communication and coordination that impact the quality of the science that your team produces. We know that poorly managed collaboration can negatively impact the quality of the science your team does. That said, I think collaboration plans are especially critical in these 4 situations. When you're starting a future collaboration, thinking about that collaboration and how you're going to do it before the start of an initiative can help build in those team processes from the start and help you prepare for writing your grant proposal. Second, launching a new collaboration, you've received your funding and you need to launch your team and its processes, and you want to do it in a way that helps set you up for success. In an ongoing collaboration, maybe you've been working together for a while and you've started to develop some bad habits. Going through collaboration planning can help sort of do a nice little reset. And finally, you're a new investigator leading a collaborative project for the first time. Writing a collaboration plan can help scope out the work that is needed to support that collaboration and help you to share your thoughts with your collaborators about how you, as the PI, want your team to work. And a structured conversation like collaboration planning can help that new investigator share their thoughts on how they want to collaborate without getting drowned out by the voices of more experienced collaborators who might want to work differently. And finally, I really want to stress that a collaboration plan is a living document that's designed to address the team's unique needs at this moment in time. And it should absolutely evolve and change as the team and your science progresses. Collaboration planning has many benefits for teams. The first and primary goal of collaboration planning is to help the team discuss potential pitfalls before they happen through this focus on the different aspects of effective teamwork. Secondary goals and benefits include that discussing potentially sensitive topics like authorship or resource allocation can, with a facilitator, helps build that culture of trust and psychological safety. Collaboration plans can also help communicate your procedures and culture and expectations to new team members when somebody new joins the team. MPI applications that can use those topics from collaboration planning. I'm sure that we have all seen MPI plans that say things like, our team has been working together for 10 years and we don't anticipate any problems. Now imagine how much more compelling that leadership plan would be with a more thoughtful, detailed approach modeled on the collaboration planning techniques. And we've done this with a number of teams and it does review really well. And it definitely makes your leadership plan stand out. Similarly, large center or institute proposals that require an administrative core can use the collaboration planning topics to structure their proposal. If you are interested in developing a broader collaboration planning program at maybe your CTSA, the Cancer Center, your department, center, or institute, how can collaboration planning help you build your program and achieve whatever those goals are? First, we know that high-functioning teams that do more high-impact science are well poised for additional future funding. It's great to get the grant. It's even better to do amazing science that leads to more grants. Second, it can help teams develop stronger, more fundable proposals because you come across as a more cohesive team with a clearer vision. Third, collaboration planning can lead to a more organized application because it provides an incentive for the team to start planning earlier and working on the hard part of a collaborative proposal, which is getting on the same page about what you're actually proposing to do. I often hear from busy, successful, productive faculty members that they would like to do more collaborative research, but it takes so much more time than a single investigator proposal, often for less money for their own labs. Collaboration planning can offload some of that burden of collaboration from the teams, especially if you have trained facilitators who can not only walk them through the collaboration planning session, but also direct them toward resources to support their collaborative work. Finally, it can help develop a culture of thoughtful, optimized team science that can radiate out. Ideally, once an investigator has gone through collaboration planning and seen its benefits, they start to incorporate those principles of collaboration planning into their other collaborative work. And that is absolutely what I've seen over the past few years of delivering these sessions. So what do the teams think? We do a post-session survey with each collaboration planning session and found that the vast majority have found it to be a really valuable experience. This is data from about 200 participants. Granted, we are still looking at general satisfaction with the experience and have not yet started collecting data on the longer-term impact. But I think to get 96% of participants, all busy scientists, to agree that spending 90 minutes talking about team processes and sometimes even their feelings was a valuable experience, that sure feels like a huge win to me. And my hypothesis here is that there is nothing magical about the intervention. I think the real magic here is the conversation itself. Science teams so rarely spend time proactively planning how they want to work together. And when they do, it feels good and worthwhile. So just a little preliminary data from what we've collected over the years. In the pre-session survey, we ask participants what their goal is for participating in a session. And some of the most common answers are to clarify project goals, roles, and responsibilities, to improve their collaboration skills, especially on cross-disciplinary science teams, and to improve team effectiveness. And one of the things I think is really interesting about this, that these are all pretty general answers. And I think this really underscores how important these collaboration planning sessions are. The participants aren't really even sure what their more specific goals might be. We also ask about one action they'll take as a result of the session, trying to prime them for action. And these top answers really reflect where we end up spending much of our time, including write authorship policies, improve our team's approach to project management, and clearly define people's roles, team goals, and expectations. And a little bit of other feedback that we get is that, I think that this is from one of the PIs. I think the discussion is very interactive and fruitful. As a PI, I've learned a lot as to how to improve management skills for a project that involves multiple labs. And another participant noted, I think it was helpful to talk about authorship and how it can be a major source of conflict in teams. So what does this session look like? Structure is pretty straightforward. If you're leading a program, you'll probably set up ways for the teams to express interest and schedule a session. I previously used a Google Doc that collects some info. And that information that you collect can really help you deliver the most effective session and can be adapted to your context. Next, I send each participant a pre-session survey where we ask what they'd like to get out of the session, if they have any particular concerns, and then some basic team science or some team processes questions. And the goal here is that we ask these questions before the session and after, and we're really trying to measure the change as a really simple evaluation metric of learning. Questions are super basic, like, I understand my role in this team, or I understand our team's approach to authorship. As I mentioned, the session itself is generally 90 minutes, which seems to be the sweet spot. We've tried 1 hour, we've tried 2 hours, and at 1 hour they say it's not enough. At 2 hours, it's too hard to schedule. So we ended up at 90 minutes. We do a brief round of introductions, give an overview of the session and its goals, and then we walk through the structured worksheet. Finally, I send each team a post-session survey that asks them, again, those same team processes questions to measure those changes as a result of the session. And some open questions for making any improvements in the session delivery. We decided it was really important that these sessions were facilitated for a variety of reasons. First, we want to manage the power dynamics. Trainees and staff don't always feel comfortable speaking up and challenging the power structures of a team, but they often are the team members who have the deepest understanding of how the work is progressing and how the team is functioning. A facilitator can help bring those voices out. We also wanted to be sure that someone knowledgeable about team science infrastructure was part of the work so we could help teams to actually address the challenges that they might identify. For example, we have found that teams have given very little thought on how to deal with authorship and attribution, and they just sort of assume everyone has the same plan as they do. In fact, in the, I think, 70 or so sessions that I've done, we had one that had a written authorship plan. Everybody else was just sort of winging it. And it's not enough to just identify that as a problem. We need to be able to guide them to solutions, like helping them understand that different disciplines have different approaches to and needs around authorship, and that they really need to discuss those assumptions for each project. Some of our guiding principles for facilitation include, making sure to hear from all voices, redirecting any personal attacks or heated arguments. And I've actually never experienced that in any of the sessions I've facilitated, but I've heard that others have seen that. And asking probing questions to make sure that they're not just giving sort of a pat answer, but really digging into what their philosophies are. So what does the collaboration planning worksheet look like? Here is an example of one section, section 3, which focuses on team outputs. Again, we know that different disciplines approach authorship, order, and even where to publish and when very differently. So we press them to be really specific about what might come out of this project. And we also try to push them to think beyond just publications, thinking about intellectual property and patents, the data sets that might come out that could be useful to others or useful in future grants. Public outreach or communications, like report back of results to communities, media appearances, and again, preliminary data for future funding proposals. Another one that isn't on here is policy reports and interacting with policymakers. And again, what will your authorship or attribution policies be? As I mentioned earlier, the authorship may be one source of conflict in team science projects. So getting into the details of this is somewhere we spend a lot of time and is really useful for the teams. Another example of the worksheet includes Section 6, Project Management and Infrastructure. And here you can see Section 6C on Information Management. What we see is that teams think a lot about their data and very little about their information. So as a trained librarian, this section is near and dear to my heart, and we often spend a lot of time in this section, which probably reflects my perspective. What we've seen in the sessions and in our research is that teams are storing their information across many different platforms like electronic lab notebooks, shared drives, Google Docs, text messages, emails, etc. And I always preface this section with asking them to consider being at the point of writing that big paper or submitting the regulatory application 2 years from now. Will you be able to find all the information that you need to accurately portray what was done? If you're interested in learning more about collaboration planning facilitator training, you can go to the teamsciencelab.com and you can go through that training there. It's a free training. You just have to register. And if you are interested in hiring a trained collaboration planning facilitator to help you with that work, you can contact me for that as well. I've delivered that training to about 300 people in the last few years, and about 150 have gone through the online version. And people really appreciate it and really think that it helps them to get ready to do a session. Some of the comments from some of the session includes clear and practical presentation. The resources and examples are very helpful and inspiring. My very favorite comment ever, probably the most helpful practical workshop I've attended at a conference ever. So I just like to highlight that. And there are training videos and materials that are available for if you are somebody who wants to lead one session with your own team, or if you're a research leader that you want to create a collaboration planning program. And it really, I know it can feel a little overwhelming to start doing something that's so far out of many people's comfort zones, but trust me that this is something that is really accessible and that you can do just like the others who have followed this structured approach. So if you register for the training, you get the access to everything you need to deliver a session or build a program. The materials are licensed under a Creative Commons license, which allows you to share or adapt those materials for your purposes, provided you adhere to the licensing terms. You get access to the worksheet, to the facilitator's guide, which is super detailed with scripts that you could actually just read off if you wanted, the pre and post survey questions, the scheduling form we use, a worksheet for developing the collaboration planning program evaluation, and some facilitator self-assessments. So you get everything that you need. You can adapt it. I do ask that if you do adapt it, that you share back to me. Let me know, because I love to see how people are doing this. Just a quick shout out to Dr. Rebecca Turns, who is at Georgia Tech. Collaboration planning is available to Georgia Tech faculty through your research development team. Highly encourage you to reach out if you are looking for some collaboration planning help. Future directions for collaboration planning as an intervention. So thinking about the intervention development, I really would like to make this a little bit more adaptable and personalized for different levels of different team stages. Like somebody who is starting a pilot versus somebody who is starting a collaborative R01. Maybe then later they're going on to a larger multi-institutional, multi-component grant like a P or a U, or a center or institute. And all of these, I think, will have different questions and a different level of collaboration planning needed. So that's something that I'm working on for the future, and to develop some resources for addressing those identified challenges. So you need an authorship plan. Here are some examples. Or that you need a data management plan. Here are the people in your local library who can help you. And then in terms of research, I really want to focus on better evaluation, developing short, medium, and long-term outcomes that are defined and measured and measurable. And what makes for a good collaboration plan, and how do people use them? We don't really know yet what makes for a good collaboration plan. I get asked often for examples of a good collaboration plan, but we don't know yet exactly how people are using them, or whether a more elaborate plan is better, etc. So those are a couple of things that we are working on. So I'd just like to leave you with these final thoughts. Coming back to our initial framing, that science teams rarely fail because of the science. They fail or falter because of the organizational choices leaders make and the culture leaders build. Engaging in collaboration planning can help your teams make the choices and build the cultures that lead to more efficient and effective collaboration through proactive discussion of how they want to work together. And finally, again, there's nothing magical really about the collaboration planning intervention. I think the magic really is in having discussions that few teams have, in an evidence-based structured way that engages teams in collaboratively deciding on how they want to work together. Thank you for attending today. And if you have additional thoughts or questions that you would like to send to me, feel free to contact me here with the email or through the website. QR code there if you want to learn more about collaboration planning and sign up for the free facilitator training. And with that, I will stop sharing and I'm happy to take any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Betsy. Anyone have any questions? David.
Thank you for the very nice talk. I'm interested in if you think we have enough skills to do adequate communication, or do we need to be taught those skills as well? I have a vested interest in that. I obviously think the answer is yes, but I wanted to see what you think.
Who do you mean by we?
Pardon?
Who do you
Oh,
mean
I
by
have
we?
a collaborator who teaches collaboration or communication skills. Predominantly mirroring, is a lot of what she teaches. And we did a grand rounds here recently, and I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, so I think that again, few scientists are trained in really good communication skills, but I think that having a facilitator there can help the team have those conversations and communicate around potentially sensitive topics. I don't know that I would say that they need to be trained in communication first before they can do something like collaboration planning or work collaboratively, but it obviously cannot hurt, right? I think all of us could probably benefit from improving our communication skills.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Has anyone here actually ever gone through collaboration planning or done collaboration planning with their teams? Raise your virtual hand.
I have not.
Does it sound like something that you think could help your teams?
Yes.
I have a question from a personal situation that happened a while back. So what would happen if you start a collaboration with a team and it's not great, but they were able to get the results they were expecting, we achieved the goals that we set up to do. And then so this is for a paper, for example. So we submitted the paper and then we got revisions, and then this collaborator refused to do more of the work to address these revisions unless they were able to find additional funding, which we didn't have at the time. So how would you navigate that situation?
So, I mean, I don't obviously I don't know the details or the context of this situation, but I think it's reasonable to not expect people to work for free, right? That people do need funding in order to support their labs, support themselves, support their teams. If it's something that they have previously committed to, like finishing the paper or doing the revisions of the paper, then I think that's a reasonable expectation. But I think to move forward, that's where I think you can have those conversations about what are our expectations of one another and how do we want to work together.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Makes sense.
Okay.
Great. We'll peek at what's offered during our consulting sessions right there too. So thank you again, Betsy, for presenting today. As always, we're thrilled to have you, and If you'd like to sign up for a consulting session, please fill out the form. Grace shared the link within for everyone in the chat. We'll also be sending that around after the session. But I do want to give anyone else any more time for Betsy, if they have any questions, thoughts, concerns. All right. Well, thank you again for spending your lunch hour with us. We appreciate it. Looking forward to folks attending our next session in early December. But again, thank you, Betsy, for everything for the session you presented today.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.